Whatever you do, make sure you visit AshKickin.com for your home fragrance, health, and beauty needs. Quality products at a great price.
Hi, I'm Brianna, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So Jermall Charlo, who just recently moved up to middleweight, he was asked in a recent interview what he thought about the Danny Jacobs versus Golovkin fight. And Jermall, he basically said he thought that Danny Jacobs won by 1 point. But then he said, but I would whoop both their asses. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You know, finally, Jermall Charlo, who has mentioned moving up since, ever since he knocked out Julian Williams, now finally he's actually calling out Golovkin. I mean, I know he probably brought his name up before, but now he's talking about whooping Golovkin's ass and Danny Jacobs' ass. Either one of those would be great fights. But when I talked to Golovkin's trainer, Abel Sanchez, it sounds like they're really not interested in the fight. Because Abel Sanchez, he says something like, if Golovkin were to beat Canelo, then he really doesn't have to fight Charlo. It wouldn't be that big of a fight. This is what Abel Sanchez said, which we know that's not true. This would be a huge fight. Not only would it be a huge fight, but it would be Golovkin's most difficult fight, his toughest challenge, because he's never faced an undefeated young lion on the level of a Jermall Charlo. I mean, even Danny Jacobs, he had been KO'd before, and he gave Golovkin almost all that he can handle. A lot of people, like I said, including Jermall Charlo, felt that Danny Jacobs won the fight. Now, Charlo's trainer, Derek James, he said in comparison to Danny Jacobs, Jermall, he's a little bit more nastier. He has an edge to him. And what he basically meant was he's a little bit more aggressive. He's a little bit more meaner than a Danny Jacobs. We know in the Danny Jacobs fight, Danny, even though he was giving Golovkin the toughest fight Golovkin ever had, Danny was still just as timid as Golovkin was in the fight. And Derek James, he doesn't believe that Jermall would make that same mistake. He believes that Charlo would be a lot more aggressive. We've seen how big and strong Charlo was at junior middleweight. You know, there's a good possibility that he would be just as big and strong at the new weight class, the middleweight division. So with all that being said, I don't see Golovkin beating Jermall Charlo. And I truly believe that Abel Sanchez, he realizes how good Jermall Charlo is, because whenever I used to interview Abel Sanchez and we would talk about Canelo fighting the other junior middleweights, Abel Sanchez would always praise, the Charlos, Julian Williams, Demetrius Andrade, and he would always say, Canelo ain't gonna beat those guys. He certainly is not gonna beat all of them. This is what Abel would always say. He would always praise those guys. So now that he has one of the Charlos who actually just knocked out another guy that he praised, Julian Williams, I believe Abel Sanchez, he knows deep down how good Jermall is, and he knows that will be a very difficult fight to win. Once again, if Golovkin struggled against Danny Jacobs, I can't see him beating Jermall Charlo. So Jermall may end up getting Danny Jacobs before he ever gets Golovkin. I feel now that the waters are getting a lot deeper at the middleweight division. This is probably going to be the time that Golovkin decides to move up to 168. But even if he does move to 168, there's still good fights at 168 for Golovkin, obviously. We just seen Gilberto Ramirez fight this past weekend. And with Ramirez's performance, I wouldn't be surprised if Golovkin adds him to his short list of opponents when he moves up to 168. We're going to see if they make the Golovkin versus Canelo fight. It looks to me like Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo, they know how desperate Golovkin is to land that Canelo fight. So because of that, they're going to make sure, obviously, Golovkin, he gets a much, much smaller slice of the pie than Canelo Alvarez. But Golovkin's in a bad situation right now. He's going to have to concede to Canelo's demands or risk passing up this big check and end up losing to someone else for a smaller check. So we'll see what happens. You know, once again, we really need to see this Golovkin versus Charlo fight. It's just so unfortunate that soon as Golovkin has a real challenge, a fight that would really be considered 50-50 going into the fight. See, because when Golovkin fought Danny Jacobs, that was looked at Danny Jacobs, he was like a 6-1 underdog. It wasn't perceived as 50-50 going into the fight. Now, since we've seen the first fight, the rematch would be considered 50-50. But see, with the Charlo fight, the difference is that will be considered a 50-50 fight going into the fight, not after the first fight. So, you know, if I was Jermall, I would try to, you know, go Shannon Briggs style, show up at his press conferences, show up at his gym, and aggressively try to pursue that fight. No one's ever done this to Golovkin before. We've seen Golovkin show up at Canelo Alvarez's, I think it was the Miguel Cotto fight, one of those fights. But I think Jermall, he should do the same thing with Gennady Golovkin. He should really, really try to pressure Golovkin to take the fight. So we'll see what happens in the future. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
This is Bobby, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Love that.